that process. So in this initial session, I am going to be talking about what data management is in general and linking those initial concepts into the type of research that many of us are interested in, and is research into agroecology. So what is data management? Well, we use that to refer to how we organize the data, how we structure it, how we keep it in storage, the issues that have to do with rights and care, legal care of the data. And it is data that we generate during the process of research. And it is important for us to do those things well, because without that, our research suffers. But more and more, it is important because our data has the potential of lasting longer than our research project. I have to say that not all data is worth keeping, but a lot of the data that we produce is valuable, and it's valuable to us, and it will be valuable in the future. So doing good data management ensures that we can fulfill the true potential of our data if we choose to keep it for the long term. And that's an important decision. In particular, in agroecology, keeping data well organized and accessible to build larger pictures is important. And so data management takes another level of relevance. And so to start talking about it, I thought, well, what do we understand from data management, and how does the complexity changes? And let me start with a number of examples. You could be doing data management for a class exercise in your statistics class, or in your biology class, or in your agroecology lesson. And that will be relatively simple. You can probably do it in your head, and requires not much skill or help. You could do that in a simple field control experiments, and many of you probably are doing some of those. If you're students and you are in the early development of your career, and you're doing a small research component for your dissertation or for a project, it wouldn't be unlikely that you run a controlled experiment in the field. That requires a little bit more care with managing your data. You might have an end of degree or an MSc project, research project, and that probably raises the level a little bit more. A PhD process is, certainly is more complex. And then you move on to research activities that are not only of your own personal concern, but where teams get involved. And those research activities might go into projects, research projects. Then it might be that the team you're working with has got a single discipline, and sometimes, and more we work with teams working on research processes that are multidisciplinary, and that increases the complexity and the demands for data management. And I want to take you through a little bit of that journey. Here's an example. This is a simple questionnaire. In fact, it's a questionnaire that was implemented by a CCRP project in a market, and they were asking people about what they say is true or not true about some statements that were associated with organic crops. So the answers to each of these questions is yes or no. And you will go through this series of questions with many respondents. For each respondent and for each question, you have an answer. And that results in data, in a data set. And you need to think about how you are going to organize those responses to each of the questions. And I want you to take 5 seconds to quickly think how you would organize this data. Some of you might have thought, oh, well, I will put it in Excel. Or some of you would say, oh, I'll put it in a piece of paper. Whichever media you use to put the data, the yes, no's that come from these answers, you will probably end up with a table like this. And you make decisions. You, for example, I made the decision of putting each question into a column and each respondent into a row. And the columns, and this tells you when I started managing data, the columns have names, and the names of my columns are short. I prefer them short. And I put yes and no as the answers, and I chose to put them in capitals. And I made loads of choices on how to structure this data. And I had 8 respondents to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 questions. Then that yields 84 pieces of data organized in a data set. And this is a simple example. I'll move to another, a controlled experiment. Now, this is a case that some of you might have come across, in which you have an experiment in a research station, agricultural research extension, and you have plots to which you are going to apply a treatment. And the plots are there in the field, and they have been labeled. B1, P1 is one of the plots, like the one here at the top, and they are organized in these columns that I'm going to call blocks. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plots in each of the blocks. And this is just field. These are plots that exist there. And you say, well, I actually have 8 treatments that I want to compare, and I'm going to put each of these treatments into each of these plots. And then you go through a process of designing the experiment, and you randomize it, etc. Could you mute that participant, please? And you go through a process of putting the treatments into the experiment, and you end up with your treatments distributed like this in your experiment. That is what you would recognize as design of experiments in some way or another. And then you decide that you're going to measure these variables in each of the plots for each of these treatments. And that would give you data. How do you organize that data? Those are decisions that go for data management. And so, first of all, well, I need to go to the field and I'm going to collect data, and you have a data collection form. That is part of your data management, how you build your data collection form. And I've decided here that I'm going to put the plots in the order that they appear in the field, 4, 2, 8, 7, like it was before in the previous slide, 4, 2, 8, 7, 1, 6, 3. And open a space so that I can have the measurement, and the measurements are going to be here, and I have what is the variable that I'm measuring, the date, and the person who has collected the data. And this is going to be now put into a digital form for analysis. And we end up again with a table of data. And what happens is that we have each of the figures, measurements that we collected in a cell, and that is total biomass, as you can see from the title here. And that comes from treatment 4, and it comes from the first block, and it comes from the plot that was originally labeled B1, P4. And then you build this whole data set, and you are now managing your data and transferring it. And you are able to understand this, but someone else who sees it is not able to understand it unless they have the key to understanding it. And that is relatively simple data management. And you have many variables that you collect for each of the plots. Now, here is something that is beginning to emerge. Structure the plots, the units on which you're measuring, the measurements that you are taking, and whether it is a treatment or it is not a treatment, etc. So all of that information goes into your data. And it just happens that the treatments that we are looking at have to do with fallow and application of organic matter and management of the type of management that requires time to actually yield some results. So you say, we are not going to run it for 1 year. We're going to follow this experiment for 8 years. And you will have the same allocation of treatments every year. And eventually, you will have data for 8 years. Now that increases a little bit the complexity. What else do you need to record? So I'm going to give you one moment now to put on the chat what you think needs to be added to the basic structure of data that I showed you there. Any ideas will be welcome, please. Put them there on the chat. The question is, what other information needs to go into your data so that you can use your data 8 years later? Date of collection, thank you. Year of collection, yes. That will probably be either another column, and then your data will grow down year 1, year 2, year 3, or it could be another tab in your Excel sheet, or it could be another file that keeps separately. Whatever decision you make, that has to do with data management. And it's going to affect how you use your data. And that's what this course is going to be about. Thank you for your contributions there. So research projects involve many of these things. They might involve surveys, experiments, lab tests, photos, videos, interviews, field observations, different data, different nature, different level of detail. All of it needs to be managed in such a way that you can actually benefit and learn from it. And it's not only you in most cases, it's you, your team, the farmers that we work with. And then I get to the point where we are going to have to make decisions on how we manage data. And decisions about the data include what measurements we take, what units we use, and units is not the units of measurement, but is it a plot? Is it a respondent? Are plots within blocks? Are blocks within research stations? Are research stations within agroecological zones? Are we working with farmers? Are the plots of the farmers? Or is it the farmer community? Or is it the catchment area for a water basin? Or is it a different type of unit, and we measured units at different levels? So what units are we measuring, and what characteristics of those units are we recording? And some, as I mentioned units, I mentioned levels, and levels is another important concept here. So plots are within farms, so the plot level, the farm level. Farms are within communities. Communities are within agroecological zone. Agroecological zones are within something else, and those we call levels. And time, it becomes an important factor as soon as we go for doing it more than once. So time needs to be put into consideration. Location, not so much as level, but as where it is in the long term. Often now we just refer to the geographical reference in terms of location, but there might be a little bit more than that. And throughout that process, we need to think about how we quality assure the data management. And that's something we're going to be looking at here. But then we have people, and data management is about managing data and managing people. So there's an element of team management. There is an element of capacity that you need to guarantee. There's a level of harmonization and agreements on how data is to be managed, and those are protocols. And those protocols are reflected in manuals or in agreements that very often are legal agreements. And all of this is framed about a set of ethics that we follow. And there is management about storage and backups, and that's a little bit of an overlap between people and data, and how we give access to the data. So data management will be about that. But we said we were going to talk about agroecology and data management in agroecology. And I like this picture because there is plenty to observe on it. And I try to count the number of crops that they have, and I actually cannot do it, but the level of diversity is high, and how green it looks is beautiful. So wanted to share that with you as my idea of what it would look like. But agroecology has been a term that has been with us for a long time, started in the 30s, and at that time, if you look at this bottom corner, we've got work on plots and fields, and then it moves a little bit to working on farms and in systems. And when I was a young student, we were talking about systems research, and more we're talking about food systems. The scales and dimensions increase as we increase the level of complexity here. This comes from a paper, and the reference is there, and you will be able to download this presentation with a link to the reference. And some people are more and more talking, and the agroecology is a very rich field with people with different opinions. But some of us are saying, well, it's about the science of agroecology. That's what we know, and what we continue learning is about the movement, is how us as communities change the way that we live, and we set the parameters of how we live together. And it's about the practices, those things that we do to produce food. And basically, it's a shift in the way that we live. Are we changing of the way that we live and the way that we produce our food? It's a serious shift. What does this have to do with data management? One more issue. Some of us are really interested in agroecological transitions. So systems are not static. They change on a day-to-day basis, on a year-to-year basis, for many reasons. What some of us are interested at the moment is, how do we manage to nudge the change that is natural in those systems so that it is the result, the later stage, the stage in the future, goes towards an agroecology-based system. And when I talk about agroecological transitions and supporting agroecological transitions, is how do we get that result? Because systems will continue changing, and they will change on a different basis, and they might follow the shape of the light blue line. So how do we do this? A lot of the research that I'm interested in has to do with that process. So another picture. Some of you might have seen this picture of the 10 elements of agroecology of FAO. There are plenty of representations, and I am not partial to any of them. But I wanted to show you this because it's a way to show complexity. It doesn't talk about what happens only at farm level, at different levels, the relationships between what the biotic aspects and the abiotic aspects, and the relationship with human beings and society and knowledge. And how all of that is reflected in interactions and exchanges of food and money, and how we govern the process. So agroecology is very complex, and if we need to embrace that complexity if we want to achieve changes of the nature that I highlighted in the previous slide. So what does that mean for data management? Well, basically, it means many more measurements about some of these aspects and about the relationships that exist in those aspects. It actually means managing many study units. It multiplies the number of levels, and the number of times increases, and it's many more times and many different time frames. Because if what you want is to change characteristics of the soil, you probably are going to take a little longer than if what you want is to create a quick pollination or introduction of a crop, or introduction of a new crop into a plot. So the time frames are very variable. And usually we work in many locations, and there is no way we can do this without having multidisciplinary approaches. The quality assurance of all of this increases. So it's no longer only us individually doing it, but us doing it collectively and agreeing and getting the right support. About management, same boxes as before, team capacity protocol, but now combined approaches become central, and mixed methods. So how do we deal with that in terms of managing people? And knowledge systems, particularly when we start working with farmers that have very valid but different knowledge systems in many of the places that I work to the one that I bring with me. And the agreements are affected, and the manuals get affected, and who builds them and who sets them up. All of that is reflected in ethical approaches that need to be rethought, and that affects our data management. Storage and backup take a different dimensions, and access becomes even more important. So data management for agroecological research, and this is the key point that I wanted to make, increases the complexity of our task. This is a starting course on data management, but we have chosen some of the topics so that we start building the basis for that big challenge. And so this course has 4 modules, and they are here 1, 2, 3, and 4. An introduction, the first 4 sessions, a module for concepts and quality assurance, a module for data management, and we have chosen a specific tool for that, and module for the beginning of how to manage qualitative data. So a little bit of quantitative data and a little bit of qualitative data. And we are going to go through a chain that we hope sets the basis for the course. And it's concepts and definitions. We started it just now, a series of ethical provoking thoughts that is coming immediately after my presentation. Then and that is module 1. Module 2 covers storage and sharing, quality assurance, and good housekeeping. And module 3, software options. Software options we will start discussing in module 2, but we are going to go and have chosen one software option that we think is going to be potentially useful for you. And then data structures in practice. How do we manage this? What most people think about data management as bringing data together and managing it. And finally, non-numerical data. So that's what we're doing. And there are some sources here. And these resources and sources you will be able to find on the Moodle site too. And I'll stop there.